Hello and welcome to a very special discussion on the IMF's Extended Fund Facility and its fifth and sixth combined review conducted by the IMF. And we are honored to be in discussion with Mr. Evan Papageorgiou, the IMF Mission Chief for Sri Lanka. Welcome to Rupavahini, the national television, Mr. Papageorgiou, and it's certainly an honor to have you and welcome to the program. Ayubova.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
All right, so I have to have an outset of this entire discussion. I would take a moment to just go back as to what exactly we will be discussing upon. Sri Lanka entered into a 2.9 to 3 billion bailout program, that is IMF bailout program, in March 2023. And this was in the phase of a deep economic and humanitarian crisis that existed at the time. And further to that, the program is scheduled to be concluded in March, particularly to be precise on the 19th of March in 2027. But as a result, the program has now entered to the final year. Now this program includes 8 reviews altogether, and 4 of them have been completed as of the time that you arrived to Sri Lanka on the 26th of March. But due to the unexpected situation that occurred due to the adverse weather condition with Ditwa cyclone in November in Sri Lanka, IMF decided to combine these 2 reviews, the 5th and the 6th. And further to that only, that this mission chief has arrived in Sri Lanka to conduct these reviews. So in this context, IMF has the team headed by Mr. Evan Papageorgiou, the mission chief for Sri Lanka. He visited on the 26th of March, as mentioned before, till the 9th of April, which is today that we are holding this discussion on, upon completion of the discussions. And following the completions of the mission, the combined review, we learned that IMF has reached a staff level agreement as of now, and with the latest update, we are having this discussion. To start off, Mr. Papageorgiou, you arrived in Sri Lanka on the 26th of March, and that is to conduct the combined reviews of the 5th and the 6th session. And could you explain the reason for the combining of these 2 the review sessions, the 5th and the 6th, how it was conducted, and the latest update on it?
Thank you, Dulanjali. It's great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about Sri Lanka's Extended Fund Facility program with the IMF. As you said, we arrived into the country on March 26th for our combined review, 5th and 6th review, under the EFF program, and we concluded today. I am very happy to report that we have reached a staff level agreement with the authorities. And under that staff level agreement, the authorities will be eligible to go to our executive board for the completion of the 5th and the 6th review. Let me tell you a little bit about our work here and also the reason why we combined reviews. As you mentioned, due to devastating impact of Cyclone Ditwa in November and in December of last year, we had to readjust the completion of the 5th review at the time. And we had to go back to our board and create a new opportunity for a new rapid financing instrument to be deployed to the country rather than completing the 5th review, because at the time the uncertainty was too high and we had to intermediate new data and incorporate new information into our assessment. Because of the authorities' strong commitment to the EFF program, ongoing strong commitment, and our assessment about the continuation of the efficacy of this program and the appropriate continuation of this program, we decided to merge or combine these 2 reviews, both the 5th that was not concluded and the 6th, which is up to date, and that way to catch up, if you will, with program performance. The program, as you mentioned, is a 4-year program, has about 1 year left into it, and we would like to catch up and create the opportunity to complete these 2 reviews and then have 2 more reviews for the remainder of this year. We are very pleased to be able to reach staff level agreement with the authorities. We announced today, this morning, we had a press release and a press conference after our concluding meeting with the economic team of the administration and of the central bank. And now we're looking forward to the authorities' completion of some prior actions, as well as some financing assurances review and continuation of the debt restructuring efforts. And after that, we will be able to go to our executive board in a few weeks' time and then take Sri Lanka's case in front of the board to continue with with a program and hopefully conclude this review and offer $700 million to the country.
Right, Mr. Papageorgiou. Now, how would you assess Sri Lanka's progress as of now, at present, and that is in terms of the fiscal performance, monetary stability, inflation, and even the economic growth?
So Sri Lanka's economy has shown remarkable turnaround. Obviously, as you all know very well, the economic crisis was a very deep one that created a significant economic shock and created a necessary adjustment. Already you see significant improvement in most economic variables that we observe, and there's a significant turnaround on many economic indicators. Take growth, for example. In 2025, the economy grew by 5% year on year on real terms, and that followed one more year worth of 5% in 2024. So clearly the economy is coming back in a strong and sustainable manner, which we appreciate and we want to continue seeing more. You mentioned about fiscal performance. This is also another pillar of the extended fund facility that we based the program performance on. We want to see continuing improvement, and this has already come a long way. Tax revenue to GDP, which is one of the indicators we're monitoring, came from 7.3% of GDP in 2022, or in the bottom of the top of the cycle, or the top of the economic crisis, and it has has more than doubled to 15.3 in 2025. Similarly, inflation that used to be nearly 70% at the height of the crisis has come down to a much more manageable level, around 2.2% from March, or 2% or so in the first quarter of this year. Foreign exchange reserves, the central bank's accumulation program has worked very well, where reserves are now at about $7 billion as of March of this year, up from a few $1 million at the bottom of the crisis, and continue to show good recovery. So we are very pleased and emboldened by the good action. This is a direct consequence of the strong efforts that the Sri Lankan people have put in, and all the sacrifices that they have to go through in terms of adhering to the program and continue with very strong adjustment. The program is one of stabilization, but one also of reform, and we are very heartened by the strong recovery, because this recovery is what allows further reforms to take place and the good dynamics to continue playing out.
All right, and certainly it's positivity that you're mentioning all these facts, and certainly a relief for the people who are resilient amidst the crisis. In the global context, as of now, ladies and gentlemen, we are being aware of the situation, the global situation where every nation, almost every nation, is adversely affected due to the ongoing conflict between US, Israel and Iran, the Middle Eastern region. So naturally, Sri Lanka is also adversely affected in several aspects, but particularly it will be on the price hike in the energy crisis that we're facing, the fuel price increases, and also the possible impacts on the tourism sector. So thinking about these aspects particularly, how does the IMF view these risks that would arise? And is there any space for possible policy flexibility in order to help Sri Lanka absorb certain shocks that might externally appear or emerge? What is the possible policy flexibility that would be offered by IMF?
Dulanjali, this is one of a significant shock for the country. The conflict in the Middle East has poses very large risks to many countries in the region, but particularly Sri Lanka, given its dependence on the Middle East for fuel and many other imports. For example, the Middle East region as a whole accounts for roughly 50%, or roughly half, of all petroleum product imports. And so any dislocation or any issues with delivery of petroleum products fits directly into this energy security and energy crisis. So it's one thing to have issues with high prices, but it's another thing also of having problems with supply and delivery of these products into the country. In addition, as you know, a lot of Sri Lankans live and work in the Middle East, and so they emit often back to their loved ones, and about 40% of all remittances into Sri Lanka come from the Middle East. And so this is a very significant another channel of propagation of shocks that could come to pass. In addition, the Middle East as a whole region accounts for about a third of all flights coming into connecting Sri Lanka to the world, particularly from Europe. And this can have direct implications into transport, and particularly on the tourism sector, which is very important for this country, as you know. So these are risks that we are looking very, very closely. In addition, Sri Lanka's exports to the Middle East are at risk, particularly tea, for example. 10% of all tea exports out of Sri Lanka go to the Middle East, and this could be impacted, especially in a prolonged conflict situation. You mentioned accommodation and how things can happen. So, of course, the responses need to be commensurate to the type of a shock, and this is a significant shock. But depending also on the duration of the shock, the accommodation or the responses could be different. There is definitely a need for a targeted support, especially for those who are affected the most. As you know, because of the high prices, both on electricity and fuel, and potentially food items and other goods, there may be potentially a large increase in inflation, or likely a large increase in inflation. And so offsetting some of this, or supporting some of this action would be important, but such as, targeted support with cash transfers or very targeted subsidies where needed. So, and there is room for that. And then beyond that, there should be a closer look into the country's exposure and looking at more long-term measures.
All right. So given the broader global economic uncertainties, what policy priorities would you recommend for countries such as Sri Lanka in order to maintain the economic stability while continuing with the reforms?
This is indeed a very important topic, and it's one that we spent a lot of time discussing with the authorities and the administration's economic team. Generally speaking, one looks at these issues from both a short-term perspective and long-term answers and policy implications. So over the short term, there is a need to potentially accommodate or look how can this shock be buffered or softened up a little bit. So as you know, this week His Excellency the President announced a temporary relief package of about 100 billion rupees that is time-bound over a period of, depending on the measure, anywhere between 3 months and 4 or 5 months until September. And then alongside of that, there are very specific targeting programs under this. So there is a subsidy for fuel, a subsidy potentially for electricity, especially for those who consume the least amount of electricity, around the lifeline level. There is support, fertilizer support for small farmers, fuel support for the fisheries industry, and of course a very important support towards the most vulnerable ones through the Aswasuma social support program. And we have had a good discussion with the authorities. We understand the targeting mechanics that are behind that, and we have supported it, and we want to see it a good implementation of these parameters. And we look forward to following up with the authorities over the next few weeks and seeing progress and ensuring that the rollout of these programs continues along the lines of what we have discussed. But beyond the short-term measures, I think it's very important for the country to not lose sight of the fact that this is a significant shock, but it should not stop the reforms from continuing taking place, which after all is what builds the capacity and what builds the ability to withstand shocks in the future. The better the economy does in the long term, the more buffers the economy builds. This is the better defense that you can have for the next shock, for the next crisis. And so there we have set out on an agenda of along the lines of what the program has been built on, of improving fiscal buffers, including through revenue-based fiscal consolidation, where the revenue base gets widened, that the state gets more revenue through organic sources, not necessarily through tax rate increases, but potentially from widening the tax net, making sure that there's administrative gains where those who have to pay taxes do not evade it, and those who pay their fair share also receive all the benefits. Beyond that, other administrative gains or important reforms through introducing greater incentives for investment, making sure that the labor market is more agile and allowing for more flexibility, laying the foundation for more investment to come into the country, and governance and everything else, like the good rule of law that comes on the back of this and establishes and promotes greater confidence into the economy. So these are the important things that we want to see continue coming, along the lines also of stronger central bank independence and maintenance of a strong monetary policy as well.
All right. And now, as of now, IMF has approved 206 million USD, and as an emergency financing for Sri Lanka under the Rapid Financing Instrument, which is RFI, and that was in December 2025. How do you assess the impact of this support on Sri Lanka's economic stability and recovery efforts as of now?
So largely, this support, the RFI, the Rapid Financing Instrument, was indeed deployed on December 19th, if I remember correctly, and it was in response to Cyclone Ditva, particularly with respect to the very sudden effect that had at the time. We were going to conclude the 5th review of the extended fund facility of the current program we were having, but because of the timing and because of our inability to be able to incorporate the effects of the cyclone, because after all, we wouldn't know for a little while the true impact of the natural disaster, we decided to, in coordination with the authorities, to postpone the completion of the 5th review and instead go towards a rapid financing instrument, or to the tune of about $206 million US. And those $206 million were used towards budget support, supporting the country in its time of need with aid, short-term aid on making sure that the appropriate resources were available, and all associated transfers and everything else could continue taking place. But it's important to note this was a one-off support. RFI was meant to be there for the country in its time of need, but before long we were going to come back with the regular facility, the extended fund facility, the regular program that Sri Lanka maintains with the IMF, and continue from there. And this is where we are now. We came back in January of this year to re-establish the discussion and get a better idea for the authorities' needs. And then we are here now to continue with this review and finish the 5th review that was interrupted, and also finish the 6th review that it's on its time right now. So performance under the EFF is still being evaluated, but as you can tell from the earlier discussions we've had, the economy is doing well. So now it's a matter of seeing how all these external shocks, particularly with respect to the conflict in the Middle East, as well the performance on other important indicators, how are these going to be incorporated into the program and into the completion of the 5th and the 6th review.
Yeah, right. So what would be the expected timeline? So since we have already now, it's the latest, as we know, the staff level agreement has been arrived. So upon this, what would be the expected timeline for the next tranche of the IMF disbursement to Sri Lanka?
So there is a process that we need to follow. After we reach staff level agreement like we did this morning with the authorities and the economic team, we have to go back to Washington and start working on our side, and the authorities have to work on their side. The authorities have a set amount of requirements to satisfy with respect to prior actions. These prior actions relate to fuel and electricity cost recovery, as well as, but at the same time also providing the necessary support to those who need it the most, the poor and the vulnerable, and the Aswasuma cash transfer recipients. And then along these lines, there's also a requirement for a financing assurances prior action, which we are working together with development partners in ensuring that there is enough support for the country to continue performing and delivering on its commitments. Alongside of that, we have some work on debt restructuring, that we continue looking at the conditions and how this is going to ensure fiscal and debt sustainability. So we hope to be able to complete these as soon as possible. It's a matter of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. So if all goes well, we should be able to come back to you with some news towards the end of May or early to mid-June.
That's great news. And certainly that gives a good understanding of what the status is of the EFF and the completion of the 5th and the 6th review as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Evan Papageorgiou, the Mission Chief for Sri Lanka from IMF, for joining us. Thank you for coming to Rupavahini, and all the very best. We hope you have a safe journey back home. And thank you very much for all of you who have joined us. Stay tuned for the latest updates coming on Channel I. Thank you.